Chapter 1. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Fell from Two Skies. Asterisk, asterisk. The night Konoha burned, two things fell from the heavens. Most people only remembered one of them. They remembered the nine-tailed fox, the Kyubi, crashing against the walls of the Hidden Leaf Village like a living hurricane of teeth and hatred and orange fire. They remembered the ground splitting open. They remembered screaming. They remembered the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, the Yellow Flash himself, standing between a demon the size of a mountain and a village full of people he loved. History books would write about that night for generations. Statues would be built. Holidays would be declared. But nobody wrote about the other thing that fell, because nobody saw it. It came from the northwest, silent as a whisper, faster than sound. A streak of silver and blue that cut across the stars, like someone had drawn a line through the night sky with a blade made of light. It was small, impossibly small for something traveling at that speed, and it struck the earth in the forest just outside Konoha's walls with a sound like a single hand clap, burying itself 6 feet deep in the soft soil between two ancient oak trees, disturbing nothing but a family of sleeping foxes and a handful of startled birds. Inside the small metal pod, something very unusual was happening. A baby was sleeping. His name, written in a language no one on this planet could yet read, was Kal-El. But that name would be lost with the pod, lost with the strange glowing crystals that shattered on impact, lost with the recorded voice of a father explaining in a tongue that would take decades to decode exactly what his son was, exactly where he came from, and exactly what he was capable of becoming. All that survived was the baby, and a single symbol burned into the metal of the pod's hull, a stylized S-shaped crest, gleaming even in the darkness of the crater, meaning something that translated roughly to asterisk hope. Asterisk. The baby did not cry. He simply slept, fists curled against his cheeks, completely unbothered by the fact that he had just traveled across the galaxy inside a metal capsule smaller than a bathroom cabinet. He had a full head of blonde hair. His cheeks were round and pink and healthy. He looked for all the world like any ordinary newborn child. He was not ordinary, not even slightly. He would not know that for years. It was a young ANBU operative named Kakashi Hatake, 20 years old, already carrying more grief than most men twice his age, who found the pod while chasing the perimeter during the chaos of the Kyubi attack. He almost missed it entirely. The crater was small, partially hidden by the overgrown roots of one of the old oak trees, and Kakashi was moving fast, Sharingan spinning, senses stretched to their limit, tracking movement on the walls where the battle was raging. But something made him stop. Some instinct, the same instinct that had kept him alive through 3 wars, told him to look left. He looked left. He saw the crater. He dropped into it in a single movement, hand on a kunai, ready for absolutely anything. He was not ready for a sleeping baby. What? Kakashi crouched down, his silver hair falling forward as he leaned toward the pod, reaching out one careful hand to touch the metal hull. It was warm, not hot, just warm, like something that had been sitting in afternoon sunlight. The symbol on the hull caught his eye, and he studied it for a long moment, turning it over in his mind, finding nothing in his considerable knowledge base that matched it. The baby opened his eyes. They were blue, deeply, startlingly blue. The kind of blue you saw in the sky over Konoha on a perfect summer morning. The kind of blue that seemed to go further back than eyes were supposed to go. The baby looked at Kakashi with an expression of complete calm, completely unafraid, and then reached up one tiny fist and grabbed Kakashi's finger with a grip strength that made the ANBU operative's eyes widen behind his mask. "Okay," Kakashi said quietly, to himself, to the baby, to nobody in particular. "Okay, you're coming with me." He didn't think about it beyond that. The village was burning. People were dying. He had found a child in need, and Kakashi Hatake, whatever else he was, whatever damage had been done to him, was not the kind of person who left children in craters. He tucked the baby against his chest, inside his flak jacket, and ran back toward the walls. Behind him, the pod sat silent in its crater, its crystals dark and broken, its message undelivered. The symbol on the hull caught the moonlight one last time. Then the roots of the old oak tree, slow and inevitable, began to fold over it. The baby was given to the third Hokage before dawn. Kakashi stood in the Hokage's office, battered and blood-streaked, and explained what little he knew. The crater, the pod, the symbol, the impossibly calm child who had not cried once during the chaos of the entire Kyuubi attack. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the professor, the third Hokage called out of retirement by the worst night in Konoha's history, listened with his hands folded and his eyes tired and ancient. "And the pod?" Hiruzen asked. "I couldn't retrieve it. I had to prioritize the child." "You did right." The old Hokage looked down at the baby, who was lying on his desk on a folded cloth, looking up at the ceiling with those impossible blue eyes, occasionally making small, interested sounds at nothing visible. "We don't know where he came from?" "No, sir." "Then he came from nowhere." Hiruzen picked the baby up carefully, and something in his chest moved. Some old fatherly muscle that hadn't been exercised in too long. "He is a child of Konoha. That is all anyone needs to know." It was also that night, that same horrible, grief-soaked night, that Minato Namikaze's newborn son was brought to the same office. His name was Naruto. He had blonde hair. He had blue eyes, not the deep galaxy blue of the other child, but a bright cerulean that caught the light like sunlight on water. He also carried, sealed inside him by his dying father, the entirety of the nine-tailed fox's chakra, a burden that made him simultaneously the most valuable and most dangerous infant in the village. And Hiruzen Sarutobi, old and tired and suddenly responsible for two impossible children on the worst night of his life, made a decision. He put them together. "They are the same age," he said softly, to no one but himself. "They are both alone. They are both—" He paused, searching for the word. "Extraordinary." He did not know then just how right he was. They grew up together, not as brothers, not officially. The village records listed only one orphan named Naruto Uzumaki, son of unknown parents, resident of the orphanage on the east side of Konoha. The other child, officially, did not exist. The third Hokage handled his care personally, quietly, cycling him through trusted families and ANBU handlers, keeping him close, watching him with careful eyes. But the boys found each other anyway. Children always do. By the time they were 4 years old, they were inseparable. The loud one and the quiet one. The orange-obsessed chaos engine and the thoughtful blonde boy with the strange eyes who always seemed to be looking at things slightly further away than they actually were. Naruto's pranks. The other boy's patience. Naruto's bottomless hunger for ramen and recognition. The other boy's inexplicable ability to stand very still and listen to things no one else could hear. Nobody had named him yet. Not officially. But Naruto called him Ken, because Naruto was 4 years old and thought it sounded cool. And that was enough. Ken didn't mind. Ken never minded much of anything. What Ken didn't tell anyone, what Ken didn't fully understand himself yet, was what happened sometimes when he was afraid. When the older kids in the market threw things at Naruto and called him Demon Child. When the shadows felt too heavy and the world felt too small, something happened inside him. Something warm and vast and endless, like swallowing a star. And the rocks would move without being touched, and the sound would seem to stop. And his eyes would see things, colors, shapes, heat, that no human eye should be able to see. He never told anyone. He was 4 years old. He thought everyone felt this way. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. Because tomorrow was the day he and Naruto were going to sneak into the Hokage Mountain. And tomorrow was the day Ken was going to accidentally catch a falling boulder the size of a house with one hand. Asterisk, and to be continued. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The Weight of a Mountain. The Hokage monument had been carved by hands that understood permanence. 4 faces cut from living rock, staring out over Konoha with the patience of men who had already decided what the village was worth dying for. From a distance, they were symbols. From up close, from the narrow maintenance paths that wound behind the stone ears and along the jawlines of dead Kage, they were just rock. Crumbling, uneven, and absolutely forbidden to children under any circumstances whatsoever, which was precisely why Naruto had been planning this for 3 weeks. "The fence has a loose post on the east side," Naruto whispered, with the specific gravity of a military commander briefing his finest general. He was wearing his orange jacket despite the early morning chill, which Ken privately thought was the least stealthy color choice imaginable. "I already checked twice. We go through there, follow the drainage ditch up to the maintenance trail, and then—" He spread his arms wide. "We're on top of the 4th Hokage's head." Ken looked at the fence, then at the mountain, then at the very large sign that read, "Restricted Area, Authorized Personnel Only," in letters designed to be read by people who perhaps couldn't read very well. "The sign," Ken said. "What about it?" "It says, restricted." Naruto squinted at the sign with the focused disdain of someone who had decided that certain rules existed specifically to test whether you were interesting enough to break them. "That's for boring people," he concluded, and began moving toward the fence with the confidence of a boy who had never once in his life considered that something might not work out. Ken followed. He always followed. Not because he was weak or easily led, but because something about Naruto's particular brand of forward momentum made the world feel navigable. Naruto didn't seem to notice the way shopkeepers' eyes went flat when they walked past. He didn't seem to feel the specific silence that followed them through certain streets, that particular human quiet that was worse than noise, because it meant people were deciding something about you before you'd done anything at all. Or maybe Naruto did notice. Maybe he just refused to let it slow him down. Ken hadn't decided which was true yet. The fence post came loose exactly as promised. They were through in 30 seconds. The drainage ditch was steeper than it looked from below and smelled like rain and old stone and something Ken's nose categorized as asterisk high altitude asterisk, even though they were still barely above street level. He was cataloging it without meaning to, the way he always cataloged things: temperature gradients, the subsonic vibration of the rock under his feet, the exact distance to the 3 ANBU he could somehow sense moving along the ridge above them, positioned like parentheses around a sentence they hadn't written yet. He almost said something about the ANBU, then didn't. Because Naruto was smiling the way Naruto only smiled when something felt like an adventure rather than an ordinary day. And Ken had learned very young that ordinary days were something other people got to have. The maintenance trail was narrow. To the left, the mountain rose in rough-cut shelves of granite. To the right, Konoha spread out below them in morning light, rooftops and smoke and the distant silver thread of the river. And beyond it all, the forest pressing against the walls like a living thing that hadn't forgotten the village was built inside it. "Look at that," Naruto breathed. Ken looked. His vision shifted without his permission, the way it sometimes did. And suddenly he was seeing heat blooms over the forge district, and the cold blue signatures of water in the pipes beneath the streets, and the pale orange warmth of thousands of people moving through their mornings in the complicated specific patterns of a city that didn't know it was being observed. He blinked. The world went back to normal. "Yeah," he said. "Look at that." They climbed. The trail wound upward past maintenance brackets and iron rungs driven into the stone, past carved sections where the rock had been shaped and smoothed by chakra-enhanced tools into the sweeping lines of a nose, the heavy shelf of an eyebrow. Up close, the faces were enormous in a way that photographs didn't capture. Not symbolic, not distant, but simply asterisk large asterisk, with the dumb, indifferent largeness of geology. They were level with the third Hokaga's left ear when Ken heard it. Not with his ears, exactly. With the thing underneath his ears, the sense he didn't have a name for, the one that measured the world in pressure and mass and the specific language of objects under stress. He heard it the way you feel a change in weather before the clouds arrive. A crack, high above them, 50 meters, maybe 60, where the maintenance crews had been working last week, where Naruto had pointed out a section of loose-facing stone with the excitement of someone identifying useful tactical terrain. Ken stopped walking. "Ken? What?" "Move," Ken said. And his voice came out wrong, not loud, not panicked, but very flat and very certain in a way that made Naruto go immediately still, because some tones of voice are older than language and the human body recognizes them without being told. The crack became a groan. The groan became a sound like the mountain clearing its throat. And then the boulder came. It was not a small boulder. It had been part of the facing work above the fourth Hokaga's brow. Decorative stone, roughly shaped, held in place by brackets that had apparently decided this morning was an acceptable time to fail. It was approximately the size of a modest house. It was coming down the mountain face in a series of grinding impacts that threw chips of granite outward like shrapnel. And it was coming down directly toward the maintenance trail and directly toward a boy in an orange jacket who had not yet processed that he needed to stop standing there. Ken moved. He didn't think about it. There was no moment of decision, no heroic internal monologue, no weighing of options. There was Naruto in the path of a falling mountain, and then there was Ken moving toward it. And the two facts were connected by something more fundamental than thought. He stepped in front of it, and he put up his hand. The boulder hit. The sound it made was not like anything Ken had heard before. It was not the crack of impact or the crunch of breaking stone. It was a sound that went away, a sound that should have continued and simply didn't, cut off at the moment of contact like a sentence ending mid. It was silence, where the physics of the situation had been expecting noise. Ken's feet didn't move. The boulder stopped. It sat against his palm, his single, upraised 5-year-old palm, like it had decided to rest there, like it was thinking about something. The stone face of it was pressed against his hand, and his hand was pressed against nothing, against air, against something invisible that had decided to be solid. Dust settled around him in slow curtains. He stood there holding a boulder the size of a house with one hand and looked at his fingers and thought, with the peculiar clarity of a child encountering something they don't have words for yet. Asterisk. Oh, asterisk. Naruto was staring. Naruto, who had never in 4 years of knowing Ken been fully speechless, was standing 3 meters back on the maintenance trail with his mouth open and no sound coming out of it. Somewhere above them, on the ridge, Ken felt the 3 Anbu become very still. Slowly, with the same careful attention you'd give to something fragile, though fragility was clearly not the issue here. Ken turned. He walked 2 steps to the side. He set the boulder down against the mountain face. It made a sound when it settled. Normal physics, resuming their scheduled operation. He looked at his hand. It wasn't hurt. There wasn't even dust on it, which didn't make sense. He rubbed his thumb across his palm, methodically. "Ken," Naruto said. His voice had gone very small. "How did you—" "I don't know," Ken said, which was true. That was, "I know. You just—" "I know, Naruto." A pause. The wind moved through the carved stone above them, making a low sound like a question. Then Naruto said, very carefully, with the specific gentleness that only appeared in him during the 3 or 4 moments per year when something genuinely landed. "Did it hurt?" Ken thought about it. "No," he said. "Were you scared?" Another pause. Ken looked out over Konoha, the rooftops and the river and the forest beyond, and somewhere down in the streets the ramen stand that opened at 7. and the apartment where his handler would be beginning to wonder where he was. "I was scared it wouldn't stop," he said. "I didn't know if it would stop." He didn't say, asterisk, "I was scared of myself." He didn't say, asterisk, "I didn't choose to do that. It just happened. And if it just happens, what else might just happen?" He didn't say, asterisk, "I have been feeling something inside me for as long as I can remember, and I don't know what it is, but today it had weight." He didn't say any of that. He was 5 years old. But on the ridge above them, the ANBU were already moving, already sending signals, already composing the words that would travel up the chain of command toward a desk in the Hokage Tower, where an old man sat with very tired eyes and a pipe that had gone cold, reading reports about things that shouldn't be possible. Tomorrow, Ken's ordinary life would end. Today, there was still the view. "Come on," he said. "You wanted to see the top." Naruto blinked, then grinned. Slow at first, then all at once, like sunrise. "You're the coolest person I know," he announced. "I'm not even joking. That's a real thing I just said." Ken almost smiled. "I know." They climbed. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The Man with Cold Eyes. The report reached the Hokage's desk at 11:47 p.m. Hiruzen Sarutobi had been Hokage 3 times now, which meant he had read thousands of reports, and he had developed a very specific sense. Not a jutsu, not chakra, just something that lived in the back of his throat, for which ones would change things. Most reports were weather. They came and went and rearranged nothing. But some reports were geology. They arrived quietly and shifted the ground beneath everything that came after. This one was geology. He read it twice, then a third time. Then he set it down and sat very still for a long moment, which was the closest Hiruzen Sarutobi ever came to being frightened. Asterisk subject is male. Approximate age, 5 years. No registered clan affiliation. No chakra signature detected. Repeat, no chakra signature detected at any point during the observed event. The object displaced was stone. Weight estimated at 400 kilograms. Subject showed no physical strain, no hand signs, no apparent exertion. The object moved because the subject wanted it to move. He underlined that last sentence, not because he needed to remember it, because the act of underlining it gave him an extra 3 seconds before he had to decide what to do next. He called for Kakashi. Ken did not sleep that night. This was not unusual. Ken frequently did not sleep, had in fact developed a complicated relationship with sleep that mostly involved lying very still and waiting for his body to give up and do the thing it needed to do. But tonight was different. Tonight, the not sleeping had a shape to it. It sat on his chest like something with mass. He lived in a small apartment in a quiet ward of Konoha, not far from the civilian sector. His handler, a broad, tired woman named Mitsu, who had been assigned to him 2 years ago and had never once explained why a 5-year-old needed a handler, slept in the room across the hall. He could hear her breathing through the wall. Even breathing, undisturbed. She didn't know yet. Ken lay on his back and looked at the ceiling and thought about the rock. Not the moving of it. He'd been thinking about the moving of it all evening, and the thinking was starting to feel like a groove worn into wood, circular and going nowhere. He thought instead about the moment before. The moment when Naruto had been falling and Ken had looked at the stone, and something in him had said, simply and without drama, asterisk, no, asterisk, not asterisk, I will stop this. Not asterisk, I should do something. Just asterisk, no, asterisk, like a refusal. Like a word spoken to the universe in a language Ken hadn't known he spoke. He raised his hand above his face in the dark. 5 fingers, ordinary looking. He concentrated, not on moving anything, just on the feeling. The one that had been there all his life, the low hum beneath everything that he'd never had a word for. It was there now, It was always there. But tonight, it felt closer to the surface. He lowered his hand. Asterisk. What else might just happen? He still didn't have an answer. That was the problem, not the power. He was 5. He didn't entirely understand what power meant yet, but the asterisk just happening asterisk of it, the way it had arrived without permission, without warning, without any gap between the wanting and the doing. There was something terrifying about that. Something that had no name but lived right next to the word asterisk accident. Asterisk. He was still thinking about this when he heard the sound on the roof. Very quiet. Barely there. The kind of sound that wasn't a sound at all, but rather the absence of sound in a place where there had been ambient sound before. Ken had been noticing things like this his whole life without understanding why. The way he could hear conversations 2 streets over. The way he always knew when someone was about to knock before they knocked. He'd assumed everyone could do that. He was beginning to revise that assumption. He sat up. There were 2 of them. He couldn't see them, but he could feel the weight of them above him, could track the small adjustments in pressure as they moved. An Bu. He knew what An Babu were the way all children in Konoha knew. Peripherally, incompletely, with the specific understanding that they were not something you talked about at the ramen stand. He lay back down. He closed his eyes. He did not sleep. They came for him in the morning, not roughly. That was the first thing. No one grabbed him or spoke in sharp tones. The man who knocked on the door was young, maybe 20, with silver hair that shouldn't have worked on anyone, but somehow worked on him, and a mask pushed up over one eye, and the particular quality of stillness that Ken was beginning to recognize as the stillness of someone who had trained themselves out of the habit of being readable. "Ken," the man said. Not a question. "Yes," Ken said. "I'm Kakashi. I've been asked to bring you to meet someone." Mitsu was standing behind Ken, one hand on his shoulder, and Ken could feel that her hand was very slightly unsteady. She was frightened. She was frightened, and trying not to show it, and not entirely succeeding. Ken filed that away. "Okay," he said. Kakashi looked at him for a moment, the one visible eye doing something complicated that Ken couldn't fully read. Then he nodded. "You can bring something if you want." Ken thought about it. "No," he said. "I'm okay." The Hokage Tower smelled like old wood and older paper and something underneath both of those things that might have been tobacco. Ken walked beside Kakashi through corridors that felt like they were made of compressed history, every surface holding the memory of important conversations, and he looked at everything with the careful attention he gave to most things, cataloging and filing and waiting. The office was at the top. Of course it was. The old man behind the desk had a face that had been kind for so long that the kindness had become structural, built into the bones, load-bearing. He looked at Ken the way a person looks at something they've been thinking about for a long time and are now seeing for the first time in person, with a mixture of recognition and recalibration. "Sit down," he said, gently. Ken sat. Kakashi remained near the door. The window behind the Hokage's desk showed Konoha in morning light, the same view from a different angle, rooftops and river and forest, and somewhere beneath it all, the quiet streets beginning to move. The Hokage was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you know why you're here?" "The rock," Ken said. The old man's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Yes, the rock." He laced his fingers together on the desk. "Ken, I'm going to ask you something and I want you to tell me the truth, even if you think the truth might get you in trouble. Can you do that?" Ken considered the offer carefully. "What if the truth does get me in trouble?" A very small pause. Something moved in the old man's eyes, not quite amusement, but related to it. "Then we'll deal with that together." Ken looked at him for a long moment, at the tired eyes, at the cold pipe, at the hands that had seen enough to be done with pretending. "I don't know how I did it," Ken said. I don't know how I do any of it. It's always been there. I thought... He stopped, started again. I thought it was something everyone had. What does it feel like? The Hokage asked, quietly, like the question actually mattered to him. Ken thought about how to explain a sound you'd heard your whole life, a frequency that had always been present, the hum beneath everything. Like something waiting, he said finally, but not threatening, just. He paused, patient. The room was very still. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at the boy in the chair, this 5-year-old with no clan, no chakra signature, no explanation, and the specific calm of someone who has never been able to afford to be uncalm. And he thought about the report on his desk, and the underlined sentence, and the question it raised that he had been sitting with all night. Asterisk, not what is he, but what happens to him now. Ken, he said slowly, I want you to know something. You are not in trouble. Ken nodded, once, careful. But I think, the old man continued, that you and I are going to need to talk quite a lot over the coming weeks. And I think... He glanced at Kakashi, something passing between them that Ken wasn't meant to catch, but did. I think some things about your life are going to change. I know, Ken said. The Hokage looked at him. I could hear them, Ken said simply, on the roof, last night. He folded his hands in his lap, very composed, very 5 years old. I've been waiting for this. I didn't know what it would look like, but I've been waiting. Outside, Konoha continued its mourning. Ramen stands opened. Shinobi moved through streets. Somewhere on the other side of the village, Naruto Uzumaki was probably eating something inadvisable for breakfast and telling whoever would listen about the coolest person he knew. In the Hokage's office, an old man and a boy regarded each other across a desk, and somewhere between them, patient and unasked and waiting, a question sat. Asterisk, what are you? Ken didn't have the answer yet, but for the first time in his life, he was in a room with someone who might help him find it. Chapter 4. Asterisk asterisk. Chapter 4. The Weight of Ordinary Things. Asterisk asterisk. The first test was embarrassingly simple. Hiruzen set a candle on the desk between them and asked Ken to light it using chakra. Standard diagnostic. Every child in the village had sat through some version of this. The small flame, the focused intention. The first proof that something alive and shinobi-shaped was moving inside them. Ken looked at the candle for a long moment. Then he looked at the Hokage. I can't, he said, not apologetically, just as information. Hiruzen noted this and moved on. He produced a leaf, another diagnostic staple, and asked Ken to make it move using intent alone. Ken stared at it with the focused patience of someone trying very hard to do something they already know they cannot do. And the leaf sat perfectly, cruelly still. No chakra. The ANBU medic who had been called in, a woman named Yuki, who had the specific tired competence of someone who had seen too many strange things to be surprised by one more, confirmed it with 3 separate instruments, each increasingly obscure. She pressed her fingers to Ken's temples, to his wrists, to the base of his throat where the central coils usually hummed faintest and clearest. Nothing. A blank where something should be. And yet... She asked him to stand by the window. She asked him, very carefully, not to do anything in particular, just stand. Then she activated a diagnostic jutsu and watched the readout, and her face did the thing that faces do when numbers stop making sense. Hokage-sama, she said, in the voice of someone choosing words with great care. His cellular structure is... I don't have a word for what it's doing. Describe it. Absorbing. She paused. He's absorbing the sunlight. I can measure it. It's converting to something. I don't know what to call the something. It isn't chakra. It doesn't behave like chakra. But it is... She stopped again. It is asterisk doing asterisk something. Ken stood in the sunlight and watched them talk about him with the equanimity of someone who has been an inexplicable fact for long enough that he no longer finds it particularly upsetting. "How long has this been happening?" Hiruzen asked him directly. "Always," Ken said. "I just didn't have a name for it either." They kept him for 4 hours. By the end of it, the desk held 7 scrolls worth of notes, 3 broken instruments. Not dramatically broken, just quietly, as if they had simply reached the limit of what they were built to measure. And a plate of rice that someone had quietly brought for Ken around noon, because he was 5 years old, and 5-year-olds need lunch regardless of what kind of mystery they are. Kakashi stood by the door for most of it, watching. He had the look of a man doing math in his head that kept not adding up. The second test, the one that changed the texture of the room, happened almost by accident. Yuki had stepped away from the desk to retrieve another instrument from her bag, and she knocked a ceramic inkwell from the edge of a shelf. Heavy, old, falling at the specific angle that meant it was going to shatter, and the sound it was going to make was going to be loud. Ken caught it. Not quickly, not dramatically. He simply stepped sideways from his chair, 1 step, not hurried, and the inkwell was in his hand before it had fallen a foot. He set it back on the shelf, sat back down, folded his hands. The room was very quiet. "Ken," Kakashi said slowly from the door, "how did you know it was going to fall?" Ken considered this genuinely. "I heard the air change around it," he said after a moment. "When things are about to fall, the air moves different. I've always been able to hear that." Kakashi and Hiruzen exchanged a look. "Always," the Hokage repeated, "since I can remember." Ken's forehead creased slightly, the first real crack in his composure, not distress, but something adjacent to it. Something like the specific loneliness of realizing, in a room full of people trying to understand you, that you have never had language for the things you experience. "I thought everyone could, for a long time." Asterisk. He thought everyone could. Hiruzen wrote that down, not because it was diagnostic, because it mattered. Kakashi walked him home at 3 in the afternoon, through streets that were doing what streets do. Ordinary, busy, indifferent to boys carrying mysteries inside them. They didn't talk for a while. Kakashi had a way of not talking that wasn't uncomfortable. It was the not talking of someone who understood that silence was also a form of presence, and that sometimes presence was enough. Eventually, Ken said, "You were in Anbu." Kakashi looked at him sideways. "What makes you say that?" "The way you stand at doors," Ken said. "You're always measuring the room, all the exits. You do it without noticing you're doing it." A pause. "Also, I can hear your heart. It beats different when you're watching something you consider a threat versus something you're just observing." At the door today, it was the second kind. He glanced up. "You were observing me, not guarding against me." The quiet that followed this was a different kind of quiet. "That's very perceptive," Kakashi said, which was what he said when he meant asterisk, that is startling, and I am not ready to tell you how startling. "I don't always know what to do with the things I notice," Ken admitted. The smallest flash of something genuinely young in his voice. "Sometimes I notice too much. It's..." He searched for the word. "Loud. Sometimes the world is very loud." Kakashi looked down at the 5-year-old walking beside him, who could hear the shape of falling objects in displaced air, who could measure the emotional state of trained shinobi by the rhythm of their heartbeat, who had sat in the Hokage's office for 4 hours and maintained a composure that most adults couldn't manage. And he felt something that he had not felt in a long time. Responsibility. The specific kind that isn't assigned to you, the kind that simply arrives. "Is it loud right now?" he asked. Ken seemed to take an actual inventory. He tilted his head. 17 conversations within a block radius, he said quietly. A dog with a hurt paw on the street parallel to this one. Someone cooking something with too much salt. The river, 2 miles east. Your heartbeat. He paused. It's always loud. I've just learned to sort it. He looked up with Naruto's exact eyes and none of Naruto's noise. Most of it goes underneath. I keep the important things on top. And right now, Kakashi said, what's on top? Ken thought about this honestly. You, he said, because you're the person deciding things about my life right now, and I think it matters what you decide. He held Kakashi's gaze with an evenness that had no aggression in it, just fact. And the dog, because it's in pain and no one's noticed yet. They turned the next corner. There was a dog, limping, matted, trying to make itself small against a wall. Ken broke from Kakashi's side without asking permission, crouched beside it, held his hand open at a neutral distance, patient, non-threatening, and waited. The dog sniffed, then leaned in. Ken's hands were very careful. He didn't try to move the dog or examine the paw immediately. He just let it make the decision to trust him, and he waited for however long that took, which was about 40 seconds. Kakashi stood and watched. The thing about the way Ken moved, the thing he hadn't been able to articulate to himself all day, but that clarified now, watching this boy and this dog, was that nothing he did was performed. Most people, and especially most people who were being observed and evaluated and questioned, performed. They shaped their behavior for the watching eye. Ken simply was asterisk. There was no gap between the Ken who thought and the Ken who acted. No performance layer. It was either the most dangerous kind of person or the most honest. Kakashi suspected, with the instinct that had kept him alive through things that had no business leaving survivors, that in Ken's case, it was both. He left Ken at the door of the small apartment that served as the orphanage's overflow housing, a building that had all the warmth of a filing cabinet, and watched the boy go inside. Then he stood on the empty street and thought about a 5-year-old who absorbed sunlight and heard the world in layers and had been waiting with total patience for someone to come ask him what he was. He pulled out a small notebook, wrote 2 lines. Doesn't know what he is, knows exactly who he is. He stood there a moment longer. Somewhere across the village, he knew without looking, the Hokage was at his desk reading 7 scrolls worth of notes and an underlined sentence and asking himself the same question the notes couldn't answer. Not what, not how. Asterisk. Where did you come from, Ken? The street was quiet. The afternoon light was the specific gold of late autumn, long and slanted and the kind of beautiful that makes things look a little like endings. Kakashi put the notebook away and walked back toward the tower. Behind him, in the building with the filing cabinet warmth, a boy sat on a narrow bed in a small room, turned his face toward the single window, and let the last of the sunlight rest on his skin. And somewhere beneath the quiet, something ancient and far away, something that had no name in any language spoken in this world, stirred faintly, like a signal reaching across an impossible distance, like something trying to find its way home. Chapter 5. 3 weeks after Kakashi's visit, Ken started hearing the dreams, not his own. That would have been strange enough, and Ken had long since made peace with strange. No, he heard asterisk other people's dreams. Fragments, really. Half sentences spoken in voices thick with sleep, colors that had sounds attached to them. The particular frequency of grief that a person only accessed when their conscious mind stepped aside and let the truth come through. It started on a Tuesday, which Ken would always remember because Tuesday was the day the orphanage served fish. And he had been lying awake thinking about how he could hear the fish before they were cooked. The market, 3 streets over. The wet salt smell of the tanks. The vendor who hummed the same 4 notes every morning without knowing he did it. Then, beneath all of that, the dreams began. The old woman in the room below his dreamed of a garden that no longer existed. He could feel the shape of it, rectangular, with a stone path, a persimmon tree in the southeast corner. She visited it every night with the devotion of someone maintaining a memorial. Ken lay very still and listened to her walk the path, and did not find it intrusive so much as informative. This was what people were made of, underneath. Gardens they kept returning to. He did not tell anyone about this. This was not dishonesty. Ken understood the difference. He simply recognized that there were things the world was not yet ready to hold, and that it was his job, for now, to hold them himself. What he did tell the new woman was something else entirely. She arrived on a Wednesday, not a shinobi, or at least not one currently on duty. She wore plain clothes, carried a clipboard, and had the specific kind of tired that belonged to people who did important work without anyone tracking it. Her name was Ayame Nohara, and she worked for a department Ken didn't know the name of, and she was there, she said, to ask him some questions. Ken said that was fine. She asked him about his earliest memories. He told her truthfully that they began with sunlight and a sound like wind through something vast, and that he didn't know what either of those things had been a part of, and that this didn't frighten him. She wrote something down and asked why it didn't frighten him. He thought about it carefully. Because the sound wasn't scared, he said. If something that big wasn't scared, I don't think I need to be. Ayame Nohara looked at him for a long moment. Then she wrote something down that took considerably longer than her previous notes, and Ken had the impression she was trying to get the exact words right, which he respected. She asked him what he could do. He listed things plainly in the order they had appeared. The hearing had come first, the layered kind, the kind that sorted the world into distances and let him choose which layer to inhabit. Then the sunlight. Then, about 8 months ago, something he didn't have a word for, a feeling of potential asterisk in his arms and legs, like a sentence that hadn't finished yet, like his body was waiting for permission he hadn't given it. What kind of permission? She asked. I don't know yet, he said. I've been careful not to find out by accident. This, of all the things he said, seemed to affect her most. She set the clipboard down, looked at him in the unguarded way that adults rarely looked at children, as though she'd forgotten, briefly, to maintain the hierarchy. That's very responsible, she said quietly. It seemed obvious, he said. And then, because he had been waiting for the right person and some part of him recognized she was adjacent to that person, even if she wasn't exactly it. When do I get to talk to someone who knows what I am? The air in the small interview room went very still. What makes you think someone knows? She asked. Her voice was professionally neutral. Her heartbeat was not. Because the questions have gotten more specific, Ken said. The first man who came, he was surprised. He was trying to find the shape of something he didn't have a category for. But your questions started from a different place. They started from somewhere you're not showing me. He wasn't accusing. He said it the way you'd describe weather. I don't mind. I know there are things you're not ready to tell me. I just want you to know I'm ready when you are. He watched her write that down too. She left an hour later. He stood at the window and listened to her footsteps until they became indistinguishable from the general percussion of the street. And then, he turned his face up toward the sky. It was overcast, had been for 6 days, an early winter gray that sat over the village like a held breath. Ken didn't love cloudy weeks, but he'd discovered that diffuse light still fed him, the way a meal eaten slowly still nourishes. He absorbed what was available and was grateful for it. He was doing this, standing at the window, face tilted, patient, when he heard it. Not a dream this time, not a heartbeat or a conversation from 3 streets over. Something else. Something that didn't have a direction, exactly, the way all other sounds had directions. It came from asterisk, everywhere asterisk, which meant it was coming from somewhere beyond the categories he'd built for sound. It was the frequency he'd noticed on the night Kakashi left, The ancient thing, the far-away thing. Except now it was slightly louder. Not loud. He wanted to be precise about this, even in his own mind. Not loud. Slightly less quiet. Like something adjusting. Like a signal finding its angle. He pressed his palm flat against the cold glass and listened as hard as he had ever listened to anything, sorting through the layers with the focus he usually reserved for finding specific people in crowds, pushing past the village and the wind and the subsonic groan of the earth slow turning, reaching for the source of the frequency, and felt, for just a moment, something reach back, not in words, not in anything as structured as language, in something that preceded language, something that language had been invented asterisk to approximate asterisk, imperfectly, across generations of trying. It lasted less than a second. It left behind the feeling of vast distances and cold light, and something that was not grief, but was adjacent to grief. The feeling of a long silence that had been looking for a way to end. Ken stepped back from the window. His hands were shaking, not from fear. He checked, the way he always checked, looking inward for the cold fish feeling of genuine fright, finding instead something that burned steadily, like the last ember of a fire that hadn't gone all the way out. He wasn't afraid. He was found. Or, not yet. Not entirely. But something knew his direction. Something had taken a bearing. And the distance between asterisk-looking asterisk and asterisk-arriving asterisk was a thing that could be crossed by something patient enough, over enough time. He sat on the edge of his narrow bed and held very still, and thought about the persimmon tree in the old woman's dream garden, how she returned to it every night across years of absence, how the path still existed in her because she kept walking it. He thought about signals, about things that had been traveling for a long time, about the moment a light finally touches something it left its source to find. He was still sitting like that, straight-backed, quiet, both hands flat on his knees, when the door of his room opened and the night duty caretaker looked in, saw him awake, and asked if he was all right. Yes, Ken said, truthfully. Can't sleep? He thought about how to answer this in a way that was accurate without being a great deal to process at 9 o'clock at night. I heard something, he said. I'm thinking about it. The caretaker nodded in the satisfied way of someone who accepted simple answers, wished him good night, and pulled the door closed. Ken turned back to the window. The clouds had thinned slightly at the western edge, a narrow margin of clear sky, dark blue and very distant, and in it, one star. He looked at it for a long time. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. What comes to find you? 3 days passed without incident. Ken slept. He ate. He helped the younger children with their reading, sitting at the low table in the common room with a patience that surprised even him, sounding out syllables, wading through the slow gathering of comprehension, watching faces change when the word finally landed. He thought about signals. He thought about patience. He did not fly. On the fourth morning, the sky split open. He heard it before he saw it. A sound like the world clearing its throat, low and concussive, felt in the sternum more than the ears. Every window in the building rattled. The younger children looked up from breakfast. One of the caretakers went to the door. Ken was already at the window. The thing descending through the cloud layer was not subtle. It was not trying to be. 12 meters of sharp angles and dark metal, displacement engines cycling down from travel speed, atmospheric entry burning at the trailing edges in a corona of pale violet that was nearly beautiful if you didn't know what it meant. It settled in the field behind the orphanage with a sound like a held breath finally released, and then it was simply there. Massive, patient, permanent-looking, and the field grass lay flat in a ring around it from the pressure of its approach. Ken pressed his palm to the glass. He'd been right then. The distance between looking and arriving could be crossed. He had 40 seconds before the caretakers would begin organizing children into the interior rooms. Maybe 60 before someone called emergency services. Maybe 5 minutes before the roads filled. He used 20 of them standing very still at the window, taking a full accounting of what he felt. Not fear, something older than fear, something that had been walking toward him down a long corridor for his entire life and had simply, at last, arrived. He used the remaining 20 moving through the hallway, down the stairs, and out the back door. The grass was cold against his bare feet. He hadn't stopped for shoes. The morning was gray and very still, the air carrying that particular quality of held attention that comes before weather changes or decisions are made. He walked to within 30 meters of the ship and stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a seam appeared in the hull, light bleeding through it, warm amber that had no business being warm, and a ramp descended, and a figure came down it. She was tall. She walked with the specific economy of someone who had stopped performing anything for anyone a long time ago. Her hair was silver white, and her face was unreadable in the way of things that had decided to stop being readable, and she stopped at the base of the ramp and looked at him across the cold field and said nothing. Ken looked back. "You've been broadcasting," she said finally. Her voice was accented in a way that belonged to no place he'd heard, each syllable placed with deliberate precision. "For years, probably since you were old enough to wonder. Most of our kind learn to quiet it eventually. You never did." "I didn't know I was doing it," Ken said. "That's what I said. Asterisk wondering. Asterisk. The wondering is the signal." She studied him with an attention so complete it had weight. "You're smaller than I expected." "I'm 14. Something moved across her face that might have been amusement, or might have been something further from amusement that happened to use the same muscles. "Your name," she said. "The one they gave you here." "Ken." "Your name," she said again, differently. "The one that was given before." The field was very quiet. Somewhere behind him, in the building, he could hear the muffled shapes of voices, caretakers talking, a child asking a question, ordinary sounds continuing to occur in the way they do, even when extraordinary things are happening just outside the window. He said, "I don't know it." She nodded, slowly. "No, you wouldn't. There wasn't time." She reached into the fold of her coat and held something out. A small capsule, dark, the length of a finger, etched with lines that were not quite writing and not quite circuitry, but seemed to be trying to be both. "Your parents left this for you. They built it to find you. It has been finding you for 14 years. Ken walked forward 3 steps and took it from her hand. It was warm, extraordinarily warm. Warm in the specific way of something that has been working very hard for a very long time and is only now, finally, able to stop. He held it and felt through his fingers the steady pulse of it, something almost biological, the last rotation of a gyroscope that had been spinning since before he could remember. He held it for a long time without opening it. "What's in it?" he asked. "Their names," she said. "Where you came from, what you are, what the yellow star has done to you, and what else it will do over time as you grow into it." A pause. "Some other things. Things a parent thinks to say when they know they will not be there to say them later." Ken's hands did not shake. He noticed this the way he noticed most things about himself, with clinical attention, without judgment. His hands did not shake, but something behind his sternum was making itself known in a way that had no name he'd located yet. "Why did they send you?" he asked. Specifically, "Because I owed them a debt," she said, "and because I am like you. Enough like you that I could follow the signal." She looked at him steadily. "And because someone needed to come who would not be afraid of what you have become." Ken looked up at her. "Are you afraid of me?" The thing moved across her face again. This time, he was almost certain it was amusement. "I have seen sons die," she said. "I have walked through the ruins of 4 civilizations and pulled the histories out of the rubble by hand. I have been very afraid, in my life, of a number of things." A pause, precise as everything else about her. A 14-year-old boy with questions is not among them. Ken looked back down at the capsule in his hands. He thought about the persimmon tree, the path that still existed because someone kept walking it. He thought about signals and the moment a light finally touches what it left its source to find. He thought about the woman in his first clear memory, not a dream. He understood now. Not exactly. Her hands, the quality of her attention, the specific weight of the way she had looked at him before the light took everything. His mother's hands, placing him in something that would carry him away from what was ending toward what might, if the math held, survive. He understood now what she had been feeling. He had a word for it that he hadn't had before. Not loss, not even grief, exactly. Something that contained both of those and went past them. The specific courage of a person who accepts that they will not be there for the part of the story they most want to see and does the necessary thing anyway. He looked up. "Will you stay?" he asked. "For a while?" The silver-haired woman looked at him for a long moment. The field grass moved in a small wind. Behind him, the orphanage was fully awake now. He could hear it the way he heard most things, clearly, without trying. The particular soundscape of 20 people discovering that something enormous had landed in the field behind their building. "Yes," she said, "for a while." Ken nodded. Then he did something he had not done in 4 years. Not since the first time it happened, and frightened him so badly he'd spent 3 months convincing himself it hadn't been real. He did it simply, without urgency, without anything to prove. He let himself rise, just a foot off the grass, just enough to feel the ground release him, the cold air moving around his ankles where the grass had been. He hung there in the gray morning light, a boy in socked feet. He hadn't stopped for shoes, but he'd kept his socks, somehow. Some residual compliance with the idea of preparation. Suspended above a flattened field beside a landed ship, holding in both hands a capsule that had spent 14 years trying to find him. He felt, for the first time in his life, something that he thought might be the complete sentence of himself. Not finished at all, barely a first chapter, but complete. Subject, verb, the suggestion of everything that comes after. He set his feet back on the ground. "All right," he said quietly, to no one in particular. To himself, maybe. To his mother's hands and his father's name and the yellow star burning somewhere above the cloud cover, continuing its long, patient work on him. To the path that kept existing because he kept walking it. "All right, I'm ready."